So the 2021 British Grand Prix isn't the first time there's been drama and controversy at Silverstone. In 2020 there was the blowouts for Hamilton and Bottas mere miles from the end of the Grand Prix, and 23 years ago there was an event that, as is often the case with controversial happenings in Formula 1, it's still talked about today. And that is how Michael Schumacher won the 1998 British Grand Prix from the pit lane. Now these days McLaren and Ferrari are fighting each other, but depending on who you support otherwise, it's not at the front of the field. This is the year that Mika Hakkinen and Michael Schumacher went toe-to-toe for the whole year, and McLaren had their innovative second brake pedal banned after the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Goodyear, in their final season, brought some better tyres for the race at Buenos Aires, and that helped close the gap. And with the exception of David Coulthard's win at Imola, Hakkinen and Schumacher had won every race that season. How boring. Schumacher had also won the previous two races leading up to the race at Silverstone, but it was Hakkinen who stamped his authority down at McLaren's home Grand Prix by taking pole by around half a second from the Ferrari. 1997 champion Jacques Villeneuve was third, 8/10 off Hakkinen, while Coulthard was a full second behind his teammate in fourth. As was often the case in Formula 1 those days, the gap between Hakkinen on pole and Riccardo Tossa Rosset in 20th was 5.3 seconds. Now, for comparison, the gap between Hamilton and Mazepin at the 2021 qualifying that wasn't actually qualifying for the race that wasn't actually a race was 2.9 seconds. Mazepin had another 3 seconds or so buffer to the 107% cutoff point, which just shows how close these cars are today by comparison. On the morning of the race, as is often the case here in England, it chucked it down, but the rain had stopped before the race had started. And it meant that some parts of the old airfield turn racetrack were damp and other parts were dry, so some drivers went full wet, some went for the intermediates, while the two Stewart Grand Prix drivers went for dries, for some reason. Now you're probably thinking that they crashed in the first few corners because dry tyres, wet track, but the first retirement was actually Damon Hill on lap 13 when he was fighting with Villeneuve for 7th. Frentzen then went off 2 laps later and then it chucked it down again. And in total, Hill, Frentzen, Sarlo, Herbert, Tuero, Rosset, Trulli, Coulthard, Panis and Diniz all spun off out of the race. Out in front though, Hakkinen had built up a lead of 49 seconds over Schumacher. Then on lap 44 he spun and damaged his front wing while also cutting 10 seconds out of his lead, but because of the spinning of other cars putting them in dangerous positions, the race director called for the safety car and that eliminated Hakkinen's lead completely. The race restarted on lap 50 and then Hakkinen bottled it again and Schumacher took the lead. Now it should have been an easy run for the Michael to the end at that point, but the stewards had noticed that under the safety car he'd overtaken Alex Wurz on lap 43 and was handed a 10-second stop-go penalty. But this penalty was given on lap 58 of 60, so Michael had 3 laps in which to serve the stop-go and Ferrari brought him in for the penalty on the final lap of the race. Now the layout of Silverstone was different to how it is today, and I'll put the layout on your screen so you can see it and I'll label bits and pieces to give you a better illustration. The pits were at Woodcut Corner and exited just after Copse, the site of the Hamilton-Verstappen clash last week for reference, and it's still used as a pit lane for British GT and also for the BTCC when they race on the national layout. The grid was also quite far back and went round Woodcut Bend, meaning some cars started while having to turn right instead of leaving in a straight line like they do today, and the start-finish line was about here, where the timing line is on the map now. So this would have been the starting grid back then before they shifted it forward to sort of here a few years later. It was either 1999 or 2000, I can't actually remember the specifics, but give or take a few yards with these start-finish lines. So with the start-finish line here, you'll notice that the pit garages are after the start-finish line. So when Schumacher had pulled in to serve the penalty, it was argued he'd crossed the start-finish line and therefore completed the race. The argument from McLaren was that he should be disqualified for not serving the penalty, or at least have 10 seconds added onto his race time, or 30 seconds added to his race time for not serving the penalty, as the rulebook should have dictated. But the issue was there was a massive miscommunication between the stewards and the Ferrari pit wall. The incident had occurred on lap 43. Ferrari was notified on lap 58. Ferrari's defence was that the penalty had to be issued within 25 minutes of the incident, but it had taken over half an hour for the handwritten note to reach the Ferrari pit wall, and Ferrari was unsure as to whether this 10-second penalty was to be added after the race or be an actual stop-go. So afterwards, the whole thing went to the FIA's Court of Appeal, and they clarified it was 10 seconds added post-race. But the time penalty can only be issued to punish an infraction that has happened in the last 12 laps of a Grand Prix. Schumacher's offence had happened 13 laps from the end of the Grand Prix, so under the rules, that penalty was wrong. The FIA basically went, well, shit, you're right. And the penalty was wiped off altogether, so Schumacher got to keep his win. So McLaren wasn't particularly happy with this. They felt, well, mainly Ron Dennis felt, as a lot of people did at the time and some still do, that Schumacher was given 10-second stop-go, even though he wasn't, but that's what he should have had to have served. And as he didn't serve the penalty, it should be a disqualification or at least some sort of heavy penalty for not serving the penalty within 3 laps of it being issued. But, as you can see here, Ron Dennis is just trying to get Häkkinen his win back, even though Häkkinen had done his best to bottle it, as he would, well, more than once that season, because he'd done so at Imola already, and he'd later do so again at Monza in front of the Tifosi. And cry a bit for it. So McLaren went to the International Court of Appeal, but the FIA confirmed that while Schumacher had indeed committed the offence of overtaking Alex Wurz under the safety car, the stewards had made a cock-up regarding what penalty should have been given under the circumstances. The Court of Appeal told McLaren that the stewards had screwed up giving a 10-second time penalty, not a stop-go, outside of the 12-lap window, and failed to deliver the penalty to Ferrari within 25 minutes of the incident happening and the team/driver receiving that decision. I hope that makes sense. I'll probably put it in text, as I usually do in these kinds of videos. I say usually, I've started doing. And because the whole debacle had made the sport look like idiots on international television, the FIA then removed the licences of the 3 stewards involved in making that decision. But even if Schumacher had been given the time penalty, he would have still won the race regardless. Häkkinen was 22 seconds behind when Schumacher crossed the line, so with a 10-second penalty, that would still be a 12-second buffer for the Michael. It's a bit like getting a 10-second penalty for tipping a guy off and still winning the race. Nevertheless, Häkkinen would still be leading the championship after the British Grand Prix of 1998, 56 points to 54, while McLaren had a 3-point lead in the Constructors. And come the end of the season, Häkkinen would take the first of his 2 World Championships after a nail-biter of a Japanese Grand Prix that Schumacher had to start from the back of after stalling his car on the grid, after Jarno Trulli had already stalled his car on the grid. I go back and I watch it probably a couple of times a year because it was a brilliant race. Not because Schumacher lost, but, just the drama involved. It was brilliant. But the British Grand Prix and the Japanese Grand Prix weren't even the best races that season because Spa was just, 3 races away at this point. So that's the quick story of how Michael Schumacher managed to win a race in the pit lane. It's a story many people already know about, but not everybody seems to know how he was able to get away with it, so to speak. But if you've learned something here today, give the video a thumb up, and for more stuff like this, click subscribe and get that bell on so you never miss out on a future video. Massive thanks, as always, go out to the people of Patreon who continue to support the channel at a more personal level. If you do want to support me at a more personal level, or just join in Discord chat, or follow me on Instagram and that kind of thing, I'll leave all the relevant links down in the description box for you. So until next time, I've been Millward. Have a great day wherever you live in the world, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. So until then, goodbye.